Welcome back to Questing Beast, I'm Ben. Today we're taking a look at this box set for Nimble, a fast tactical TTRPG. Now it says down here that it is 5e compatible, but that really means that it works with 5e adventures and things like that. The actual rules of the game and the structure of characters looks quite different than what we see in typical D&D 5e games. Now I have here the box set, which I believe is out of print, but while I was preparing to make this video, I noticed that there is in fact a Kickstarter going on reprinting a lot of the Nimble core books. This video is not sponsored by Nimble at all. That's just a lucky coincidence. So you can head over there and check that out if you want to get some of the reprinted copies. So what's so special about this game? I typically don't look at a lot of 5e related stuff, but this whole game is a great example of how the 5e culture, the 5e gaming sphere is, I believe, beginning to learn from the innovations in indie RPGs, especially in the old school Renaissance scene. The goal of this game is to take a lot of the things that people enjoy about 5e, the kind of high fantasy, epic heroes on a big adventure, but really boil it down, make it much faster, much cleaner, and make it a lot more tactical, where there are less choices to make, but those choices are much more impactful. For example, there's not hundreds of spells, maybe there's dozens instead, but each of them is useful in its own particular way. A lot of the cruft and a lot of the things that slow down a typical 5e game have been removed and replaced with a lot of innovations that make combat super quick and a lot more interesting to play. Now, this is actually a game that I have played. I played a session of it at a convention and I had a lot of fun doing so. Here's some of the stuff that we get inside the box set. We have our core books. There's a little GM screen. It comes with a map, and it even has a whole bunch of cards for tracking your actions and for tracking all of your different spells. You can see right here, which is really cool. It makes it a lot easier to keep track of everything because you just put out your spells in front of you and you don't have to flip through the book to reference things. There's some cards here for keeping track of your actions, but I found you don't need to use those too much. But there is a number of item cards that also help you keep track of who has different kinds of potions and other special magic artifacts that you can hand out to players, but you don't need these to play. There's even a pack in here of some monsters and other NPCs that you can throw at the players. But in this video, what we're going to focus on is the rules themselves. How does this game play? What sets it apart from other RPGs that are out there? Before we start though, a big thank you to everyone who helps support this channel over on the Questing Beast Patreon. They get access to the secret Discord where we chat about RPGs, and they get access to all the bonus stuff that I'm making behind the scenes, like the game that I'm developing, Maze Knights. If you want to help support the channel as well, the link is down in the description below. All right, let's begin by taking a look at the core rules. One of the first things I noticed is that it's remarkably well constructed for being such a tiny little book. Everything inside is stitch bound. You can see all the stitches right there along the inside. It's got ribbon bookmarks. All of the art design and the graphic design is really great and really easy to read. Clearly someone put a lot of love and attention into this. You even see things that are more typical for the OSR, like the end pages being used for reference materials, so it speeds up looking things up when you need it in the middle of a game. I love that there's a list of the games that the author was inspired by while designing Nimble. For example, D&D 5e, of course, but also Pathfinder, Mouse Ritter, Into the Odd, my own game, Knave, the Dungeon Coach's DC 20, Tales of the Valiant, Cairn, Matt Colville, House DM, lots of OSR inspiration and just indie RPG inspiration. And it was really interesting reading through the book and seeing the influence of all of those games pop out here and there. I love how there is a page right at the beginning here explaining how to be a good player in the game. It gives you principles that tell you not only what a good player is, but what kind of game this is. It's a game where you're expected to be heroic, but also to treat the world realistically. You're there to pay attention, ask questions, and take notes, be creative, embrace failure, and, which is a really big deal for me, respect everybody's time. One of the things that I dislike the most in RPGs is when things really drag and slow down. So a game that is quick, gets to the point, and shows the impact of actions is really important for me. All right, for stats, there are 4 main stats instead of the 6 that you typically find in D&D. So we just have strength, dexterity, intelligence, and will. These all go up to a max of +5, and 2 of them are labeled as key stats for each class. So certain classes' abilities will connect to key stats. It'll reference that specifically. There's also a list of skills here, a bit shorter than you would find in 5e: Arcana, Examination, Finesse, Influence, Insight, Might, Lore, Naturecraft, Perception, and Stealth. The bonuses to your 4 stats will affect the bonuses to your skills, but as you level up, you do get skill points that you can put into your skills to increase them. All your skill checks and saves are based on d20s, as in typical D&D. You have a difficulty class you're trying to hit, you roll a d20, add a number, try and get the DC, and you win. There's a system for advantage and disadvantage, but this works for all sorts of dice, not just d20s. For example, if you're rolling 2d6 and you gain advantage on that, you would add an extra die and then remove the smallest one after you roll all three. You can also get double advantage or double disadvantage. For example, if this roll had double disadvantage, you would add 2 dice and then remove the 2 best ones. I like the system for hit points and dying here as well. When your hit points go to 0, you are not out of the game, your character is not down. Instead, you can continue to fight, but you'll start accumulating wounds pretty quickly as you fight while having this dying condition. If you get up to 6 wounds, then you are actually permanently dead, and wounds heal much slower than your typical hit points do. There's a lot of elements in here that show how tactical combat is a higher priority. For example, things are all based on squares because it assumes you'll be using a square grid. And there's things like telling you how much damage you're going to take when you get pushed into things, indicating that shoving people around the battlefield and blasting them backward is going to be a more effective tactic. That reminds me of some rules from Matt Colville's Draw Steel. In combat, you have exactly 3 actions that you can take, just 3, which we've seen before in games like Pathfinder 2nd Edition. You want to attack 3 times, that's totally fine, but each attack after the first one is going to gain levels of disadvantage, so might not be best to do that too much. The rules for attacking here look very similar to what we see in games like Into the Odd, where you're not doing any 2-hit rolls, instead you're just dealing straight up damage. The exception to this is if you roll a 1, that counts as a miss, but apart from that, you'll just deal damage every time you attack. If the die is the highest result that it can roll, then it is an exploding critical hit and you roll for even more damage. So in theory, you can do a lot if you get very lucky. You know how in 5e there's a spell slot system, but you're spending these slots to cast things, and it's kind of a abstract, kind of kludged together mana system? In this game, it says, no, it's just mana. You have mana points, you spend them. You want to spend more mana points, you do more damage, or you have a more powerful effect on your spell. So if you're just dealing straight up damage, then how does armor work? Well, that's where heroic reactions come in. Reactions cost 1 action and are performed when it is not your turn. So if you spend all 3 actions on your turn, you're not going to be able to take reactions. For example, defend. Defend reduces damage from any single attack by your armor whenever you use this reaction. So you want to save up some actions if enemies are going to attack you so you can block their damage. This is already a whole bunch more tactical than what we see in 5e. You have to be much more careful about when and where you use your actions. You can also spend reactions to interpose or do opportunity attacks or help other people. Turn order in combat is very simple and straightforward, which I like. It's similar to my own game Knave or in Shadowdark, for example, where when you are doing combat, you just go around the table in order. You don't have to change your turn order every time by rolling initiative. You just go around the table. Everyone always knows who's going to go next. Next up, we'll look at the basics of character creation and how heroes work. But first, a shout out to today's sponsor. It's been unseasonably warm here in Kansas, so I've been breaking out my basic t-shirts from this week's sponsor, Into the AM. Like everything I received from them, they are super comfortable, they have just the right amount of stretch, and they are perfect as an everyday shirt. I wear these things all the time, and they are my basic tee of choice. The best way to grab them is in their basic tee packs, which are over 50% off right now, and they have lots of other great deals on their basic line of apparel, which you should definitely check out. Head on over to their site using my link down in the description below, and a big thanks to Into the AM for sponsoring this video. Making a hero in this game is not very complicated. You're going to choose your class, choose your ancestry and background, and then just fill in a bunch of extra stuff on your character sheet. For your 4 basic stats, you're going to choose one of these arrays, either a standard array, a balanced, or a min-maxed one. Those are going to give bonuses to your skills right here, and then you're going to get some skill points that you can also distribute to customize further. We have inventory slots for equipment, as in my game Knave. Each hero has 10 plus strength slots. Most things take up 1 slot, but big stuff like 2-handed weapons take up 2, and lots of really small things can be packed into 1 slot. Leveling up doesn't really use XP. It's more of a milestone system where you gain a level when the game master thinks you've done something sufficiently challenging. You're going to get some more hit points, you're going to get a skill point that you can drop into your skills, and there's going to be some class features depending on the class that you have. There's lots of different ancestries you can choose from, human, dwarf, elf, all the typical stuff, and they have just a short little bonus, not a lot you need to keep track of. For example, halflings get +1 to stealth. If you fail a save, you can succeed instead, once per safe rest. But there's plenty of options in here for exotic ancestries. If you want to be a dragonborn, or a goblin, or a kobold, or a bird folk, or a wordling, or whatever. It's up to the game master, of course, to allow or disallow this stuff depending on what makes sense in their setting. You can also choose one of many different backgrounds here. For example, a taste for the finer things, which gives you advantage on influence checks with the upper class. Pick your adventuring motivation, and then get some equipment and some armor, which is all listed here. You can see that armor goes up to a maximum of 22 for mithril plate, which seems like an enormous amount of armor, because that's damage reduction, right, when you use the defend action. But if you don't have any actions to spend, then it's not going to help you at all. And of course, it defends against a single attack. So if lots of people are attacking you, well, it's going to block probably all the damage from one hit, but what about the rest of them? And then you have all your typical weapons and miscellaneous adventuring equipment that you can use for problem solving. Some magical items. Not a lot of these, really. They're mostly just ideas that you probably have to expand upon, maybe by combining different spells with different items. One of the cool ideas is that the wands here have this idea that seems to be drawn from Mouse Ritter, where in order to recharge them, you have to do something concrete in the world. For example, the wand of sacrifice here, it recharges when you plant it in a new garden and leave it undisturbed until the flowers bloom. So this could take up to a year to recharge. You'd want to use this as a template for a very powerful wand that does something very momentous. A bunch of different spells here. These are broken into different categories: fire, ice, lightning, necrotic, radiant, and wind. And each of those has different tiers. The tier indicates the amount of mana that you have to use to spend it. More information about that is in the classes book. One thing that's cool is how these different spell schools are designed to be used in a more tactical way, like a lot of the elements in this book. For example, you have a flame dart right here, which does some damage, but on a crit, it causes smoldering. Smoldering does nothing on its own, but it tags them with this new smoldering tag that your other fire spells will activate off of. So Ignite here will do 4d10 damage, but only to a smoldering target. So you'd want to use Flame Dart and then Ignite to get the most out of it. There's also Zap over here, which does 2d8 damage, but on a miss, the lightning fails to find ground and strikes you instead. That sounds like it's pretty bad, except that whenever you're hit by lightning, you become charged, and then maybe you can use Overload, which does 2d8 damage to others within reach, but you can only use it when you're already charged. So if someone focusing on lightning spells is trying to hit themselves with lightning, power themselves up, and then blast everyone in the area. Or you could do cool stuff like Ride the Lightning, teleport up to 12 spaces away to a spot you can see. Adjacent creatures take a whole bunch of damage. Surviving creatures must take a strength save or be hurled back 3 spaces. And remember, there's rules for being knocked into things, which can cause even more damage. Then they're knocked prone and deafened for 1 day. There's lots of different spells like that. Stuff that requires combinations, stuff that knocks people around the battlefield, that makes things a lot more interesting on a moment-to-moment basis when you're fighting. You're not just standing still and hitting a guy over and over, things are moving. There's some good utility spells in here as well, like Ice gives you a floating disc to carry things. You have Fire with things like a Fire Step, where you can teleport to fire sources that you see. So if you've lit things around the battlefield, then you can teleport between them. That's a good way to combo stuff together. And I like some of these touches, like on Thought Leech. You can read the surface thoughts of creatures within reach, but creatures can sense you doing this and may not like it. So you'll have to deal with the consequences of using it. All right, next up, we'll take a look at the Heroes book, which goes through all of the different classes and explains how they work. And here they all are: Berserker, the Cheat, Commander, Hunter, Mage, Oathsworn, Shadowmancer, Shepherd, Songweaver, Stormshifter, Zephyr, and some extra subclasses. And I really love the formatting of each of these classes. We have a nice big splash image. We have a quick summary of what makes this class special. Then we have a breakdown of what happens at each level from 1 through 20, so you can immediately see how your class is going to progress, followed by what all the different special abilities mean, and the 2 subclasses that you can choose from. There's a lot of information in this book, a lot of special abilities, so we can't go through everything, but I love how interesting all of their abilities are. They're often stuff you wouldn't immediately expect. For example, the Cheat class, who's like the Thief, not the character from Homestar Runner, has Creative Accounting. Steal up to int actions from your next turn. You cannot use this 2 actions in a row. So you can take a whole bunch of actions back to back at the cost of being slower later. You can throw a dagger and it might hit a guy and then bounce back to your hand, or bounce around the battlefield hitting multiple people. There's the Commander, who can boost your allies and give them commands so that you can control the battlefield better, get people back on their feet, force enemies to come after you. If you're a mage, you can either be an invoker of control or invoker of chaos, basically law and chaos. If you choose control, then once per round, you can pick an option from this table, like I insist, cast a cantrip for free, ignoring all disadvantage, it cannot miss. Or no, choose a creature, it cannot harm a creature of your choice during its next turn. But if you use this too much, then you lose control, and the GM takes control of this control table and does a bunch of stuff that's bad for you. Whereas if you choose Chaos, then whenever you cast a spell, you can choose to spend 1 less mana. Whenever you do this and whenever you crit, invoke Chaos, roll on the Chaos table. The Chaos table is not in this book, it's in the GM book, so you don't really know what's going to come out of it. With each of the classes, you keep finding these fun little ideas that are implemented to make the game more surprising, but also a lot more varied, and to create new problems all the time that you have to deal with as you fight a typical battle. They seem to be designed to make you feel distinct, to make you feel cool, without making you feel overpowered. As you're playing the game, other players are going to be regularly saying, "Oh, that's neat. I didn't know that we could do that." While at the same time, you're going to be in a lot of trouble unless you play your cards exactly right. At the back, there's some story-based subclasses. for when certain things happen in game. So the Oathsworn might become an Oathbreaker. The Commander could become a Spellblade, or the Shadowmancer a Reaver. There's also some ads for some coming soon classes like the Scion and the Hexbinder, which I think are getting released in that new Kickstarter that's going on right now. Now, the last book is the Game Master's Guide, which is mostly advice combined with a bestiary and a whole bunch of one-page dungeons or one-page adventures, which is a fantastic idea for a GM book. I really like this rule, to be honest and trustworthy. Roll in the open, so players know that you're not fudging, and telegraph danger. You are the player's eyes and ears. They cannot make meaningful decisions if they are in the dark about how deadly a situation is. That's something that gets brought up a lot in old school advice. I also want to point out how great the art is in this book. It's art that I feel would fit pretty well in a typical 5e Dungeon Master's Guide, but by and large, I actually like the art better than what I see in Wizards of the Coast stuff. It has a lot more character and a lot more flavor and interest than I typically see in official D&D stuff, and I just love the style of it. Like, for example, check out this dragon. That's a dragon with personality. And look at this advice for creating adventure, something that Wizards could really learn from. Create problems, not solutions. The players are going to figure out a way around whatever problems you throw at them, so don't come up with these paths where they have to do one particular thing. Let them figure things out for themselves. Give them cool places to actually explore. Don't gate information behind skill checks. Don't punish the players for their curiosity, bravery, or creativity. Don't roll dice too frequently. It's really solid stuff that I think 5e players could learn a lot from. Even the section on running monsters has some really good advice in it, especially with this unique encounters section. These are ways to shake up combat encounters so that they're a lot more interesting and tactically engaging. Like push them off, battle at very great heights. The most efficient way to win or lose is to push others off the edge, or where forced movement is otherwise greatly incentivized. Or maybe impending doom. Try an encounter that would otherwise be far too difficult, but the heroes get an extra round or two before the enemies can properly engage. Capture the flag. The heroes must take and keep possession of an item that the bad guys desperately want. All of these encourage players to try new tactics, to approach combat in a new way. Look at how tight and dense these monster stat blocks are. You just have some hearts for their health, you have their level, you have maybe a special ability, and what they do when they attack. And that's really all that you need. Using this format, you can come up with lots of monsters that just do one weird thing. And then when you put them into a battlefield in combination with each other, they can interact in interesting ways. Let's check out this acid pod, which has caustic eruption. On death, 46 acid damage to all adjacent enemies. So it's like a walking explosive barrel. You want to destroy it when it's far away, so it deals damage to all of its allies. But there's also a section for legendary enemies. If you want big boss monsters or main villains of a campaign perhaps, you can grab one of these guys. Again, fantastic art, very straightforward mechanics that's very easy to parse. There's beholder-like creatures, you got demons, dragons, vampire lords, and this awesome Lovecraftian thing. But one of the smartest things about this book is the fact that it builds in lots of adventures ready to go. These adventures take place over just a couple of pages. If there's a dungeon, the dungeon map is right there on the page with you. They're structures that they're very easy to read, and they come with built-in GM advice so that if you're running games for the first time, you have a sense of what's actually going on behind the scenes. There's a little bit of a gazetteer of the setting that this is designed for, which is very easy to tweak. But after each little section describing the world, it has a little adventure to go along with it. And these slowly increase in level. So just by buying this short little GM book, you have enough content to run a lot of sessions. That makes a huge difference, especially for new GMs, because one of the biggest obstacles to actually running a role-playing game is getting the content to run. And this just gives it to you. Now, most of these aren't super complex or ambitious, but they're not trying to be. They're giving you a starting point so you have something to use as soon as you buy these books. And look, the maps are even jaquazed, there are loops, there are multiple ways that you can approach these adventures. They're designed to not be super linear. Nimble is a really fascinating RPG. It's definitely geared more towards a 5e audience. It's more heroic, it's more action-packed than you would see in a typical grimy OSR dungeon crawl, which is more of the stuff I look at on this channel. But it has this wonderful focus on making it so much faster and easier to play. It's willing to learn from the game design laboratory that is the old school blogosphere and incorporate a lot of those ideas into this to make the gameplay much more engaging. The choices that you have to make on a turn-to-turn basis are a lot more interesting than in the 5e games that I've played in the past, and the impact of those choices is often greater as well. It's a game that rewards you for thinking carefully about how you approach all of these different problems. And it provides new game masters with the concrete tools that they need to get up and running really quickly. Overall, it's my favorite version of 5e, if you want to call it that. I think the classes are more interesting than in 5e, which is appealing to players. The tools make it much more appealing to game masters. And the fact that it is so dense and quick to read makes it more appealing for everybody. Overall, a really cool, thoughtful system, and I would love to see more game design like this. As usual, if you want to pick up a copy of it for yourself, I will put links down below, both to the Nimble store and to the Kickstarter that is currently going on, where they're doing a reprint of some of the books. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.